Welcome to the Rise Inside podcast, hosted by Justin Starbird and powered by RISE Robotics. Listen as host Justin talks to experts from the RISE team about topics relating to mechanical engineering, industrial design, commercialization, and innovation. True collaborations work when ideas are integrated at inception to solve significant problems. Rise Inside brings together how the team continues to work with great folks to commercialize ideas. You're listening to the Rise Inside podcast. Here's your host, Justin Starbird.
Welcome back to Rise Inside. My name is Justin Starbird, and today I have Director of Business Development from RISE Robotics, Ken Gray, and Dulcie Madden from The Engine. Dulcie, Ken, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having us. This is Dulcie and I get together often by video. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you both on. You know, Ken, you and I are becoming old hat at this, getting to talk to folks in and around RISE. So, looking forward to another one.
Yeah. Hey, I have a distinction that like I was the first 2-time guest, and now I'm the first 3-time guest on the pod.
Gonna have to start calling you the. Yeah, you have to be my co-host.
The only person that's been on the pod more often than me is you.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, Dulcie, thanks for coming into our world today. This is pretty exciting. Tell me a little bit about The Engine and the kinds of companies that The Engine works with.
Yeah, so The Engine is a venture capital fund that was started by MIT in 2017. And basically what we do is we invest in tough tech companies, or what we call tough tech. And we sort of invest in 3 key areas: climate change, human health, and advanced systems. And our thesis is that essentially these companies that are developing, market changing, world changing technologies and trying to commercialize them will take more money, more time, more support, and a better network to actually be able to grow and flourish and change the world as intended. And so we're here to provide capital. As a venture firm, we write checks and investments for seed, pre-seed, and Series A companies. And then we also look to provide infrastructure, so actual either lab or shop or tooling space. And then we also seek to provide our portfolio companies with a really strong network. And we do that now across 35 investments, across 2 different funds. We still work really closely with MIT. We also work with Harvard, and most of our investments are based in the Massachusetts area.
And Dulcie, what is your role at The Engine?
Yeah, so I am an operating partner and the head of partnerships. And so it's sort of 2 pieces. And my role as an operating partner, I work directly with our founders and their teams to think about how they're commercializing their technologies. And so I have the pleasure of working with Ken Gray to think about, what types of strategic partners should they be working with, sort of what should their customer landscape be, et cetera. And I'm sort of like an extra arm or brain that can work with these teams as they're growing. On the other side of things, I'm the head of partnerships, which means that if I'm trying to build a really high value, high touch network of CTOs, operators, business development executives, that's sort of the Fortune 500 companies. So if we're thinking about, our companies going out and developing a joint venture, a joint development agreement, or a sales relationship, or even potentially some sort of financing avenue, like how does that happen? And how could we as The Engine help provide those relationships to help those things go faster and more efficiently? And so I've been here for about 1.5 years, and I love it.
That's awesome. So one, immediate question is, what is tough tech? Can you help define that? And truly, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. So tough tech, as we see it, is typically research that's coming out of a lab, and it might be the result of, a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades of research. And it's stuff that takes an intense amount of knowledge, of sort of, again, that capital piece, and then time to really think about how to do that. So it's things that just are really different. So fusion, geothermal, supercritical geothermal energy, like large scale grid level battery storage, autologous cell engineering, electrifying hydraulics and heavy machinery like, RISE Robotics is doing. So things that could really transform industries. That's what we call tough tech. And I just think it's, also goes with a category of, it's just going to take more passion, more drive, more creativity for our founders and their teams to really get these technologies done. And so part of it is, who are the tough tech founders that we're looking at, and what are those characteristics too?
Well, I think Rise fits a lot of those boxes. It just, had the pleasure of speaking with founders of Rise Robotics, and to hear, some of the, I don't want to say horror stories, but challenges that they had to not just get funding, but then to, share their vision with folks and have people, see the same thing that they did. And not only that, but also some of the evolution, right? So if you're talking about, information and then actually putting it to work to create something, it does take a lot of capital, not just in terms of monetary funding, but also like, as you just stated, part of your role is to think about some of these things and you use experience. And I think, that was really interesting, to hear, the Rise story, but, I know it. What is it that brought you to Rise or made Rise attractive to the engine?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So Rise is sort of a great sort of story coming out of MIT. Some of the founders won a couple of the big mechanical engineering competitions, 2007, 2009, came out of school with an idea of sort of hydraulics and movement and more efficient use of all of those things. Then started a company and worked for a number of years trying to think about, like, how are we actually going to build this? What is the market we're going to deploy in? What is that going to look like? And when the team sort of hit on this idea of electrifying, hydraulics through linear actuators, et cetera, it was amazing because it hit on this idea of, like, you could literally transform entire swaths of the OEM industrial machinery, sort of commercial machinery industry, right? And if you're thinking about climate change, if you are thinking about like increasing efficiency and sort of the time and human components of that, if you're thinking about safety, those really sort of hit the buckets of what we might think about in terms of being a great investment. And so we were really lucky to meet the team and sort of realize that our visions were aligning. And the thing that's amazing is that none of these technologies are easy to think about how to get to market. There's 1,000 ways to think about how to build a product. How do you actually get it to market? Who are the partners you work with? And that's part of that mindset, right? Like, it takes so much grit and resilience to think about, okay, what if we try this? What if we try this? And you talk to your customers and you think about what that path, and then you think about what is the biggest company we can build. And, I think that the Rise team really has it. Like, they are definitely thinking through the right way to build that. And they're also thinking about how to attract great leadership like Ken. And it's really fun to be part of their journey.
Absolutely. Well, Ken, we just talked to one of the founders, and Kyle Delaquila, and, saw his, heard some of the history. They also, the founders, put together a pretty unique, thought process when it does come to take on funding, right? And so Ken, tell me a little bit about, like, when we look at the minimum that they're willing to not accept, but it's actually the least amount of funding that they'll take to get the maximum, output. Tell me a little bit about that strategy.
Well, first, Dulcie, thanks for the compliments. This is an outtake of the Dulcie Ken Mutual Admiration Society today. So I guess, first of all, I think we think of it as lean investment. We want to accept the minimum investment required to get us to the next threshold. We're not about finding $100 million and figuring out how to spend it. We're about, let's really get the minimum investment that we need to get to the next level, in whatever strategic next level it is that we've defined. And that next level is going to lead us to more clients, to make us self-sustaining at that incremental level of investment. so I think, it's interesting. A potential investor referred to us as cockroaches, and said, how are you guys still here operating that way? And my understanding is that comment was made like 6 or 7 years ago. You guys, you can't survive that way. And in fact, this is year 11 of RISE, which is astonishing to me. That it's. And Dulcie, I think grit, the word you used there's grit. I think it's a really great word that I didn't fully appreciate coming from industry, a well-established company into RISE, the beginning of this year. I didn't realize how much grit this team had and how much it needs to have, to continue doing what they do. Living that way, and they're going to be successful, I think, just based on the talent, the engineering talent, the incredible technology, and this resilience or grit that this team has. It's remarkable.
Yeah, agreed.
I think just a couple more things. I mean, first of all, we're really honored that the engine selected RISE as an investment target, and the capital that came from the engine is certainly very, very important. But I actually think that the engagement of the engine with RISE is even more important. So we have an engaged board member. We have an active and engaged advisor to the board, another person, just two incredible individuals. We have access to the engine's network for hiring. So they've helped us fill open positions that we've had, where we've had great need, and they've introduced us to great talent. We've been able to take advantage of, I think, from a business development standpoint, new contacts, introductions to innovative, forward-thinking companies. And then Dulcie, one of the things that Dulcie knows that I love to engage in is we often have office hours or forums where the founders or business development leaders get to engage with one another, and we can bring burning questions that we have as startups or scale ups, kind of depending on where we're at in our journey, and say, hey, I have this problem. How have you thought about solving that problem? So there's some great, there's some great sharing going on among the leaders of the engine supported network of startups.
Dulcie, how does that, what Ken's just kind of described, how does that work within, your portfolio? Is it an anomaly, or, do you see a lot of companies now operating this way? What has made, this partnership unique?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. So I think that there's, I think across the board, it's sort of ebbs and flows per company, but I will say we tend to be a very active investor, right? So what Ken just said, we have really active board members who are happy to sort of take a lead board member position. We try to work really closely with our founders because we know it's in their teams, because we know that what they're doing is incredibly hard. If you're a first-time founder, like most of our founders are, they're coming out of academia, out of a postdoc, out of graduate work. Being able to ask for the coaching to think about how to build your company, how to build your team, how to build your commercial model is the biggest thing. And then being able to provide it if they're asking for it is the other big thing. So there's the board members, there's sort of board observers, and a cadre of people across who can help from branding to sort of the government work. So Oren Hoffman is able to do that and think through what are the non-dilutive funding opportunities with our government, with building sort of the policy pathway, with commercializations and sort of business strategy. So I think most of our companies, one of the things that makes them unique is that I think that a lot of our portfolio is really good at being like, hey, I need some help. And then we try to just be really ready so that if people are there and ask for help, we're like, we'll be here and we can figure it out and we can help you figure out how to do this really efficiently.
Yeah, we engage in everything from storytelling, like right now is a perfect example, to marketing, to go-to-market strategy, to structuring subsidiaries, to how do you set up a vertical. Our conversations run the gamut of business. We have had some great we have great conversations, and Dulcie is somebody that I can call and just bounce a harebrained idea off of, and she agrees with me way too often, but she'll tell me when I'm all wet or give me some really solid input, and it's great. I've got an advisor with experience in this space, which I'm relatively new to. So it's really, really valuable.
And what kind of things have you seen, RISE do successfully, from your leadership or your guidance?
Well, I think hiring is a big thing. Like I think that Oren and our team were saying, being able to think about commercializing the technology is huge. And I think it was like a year-long effort to sort of slowly rope Ken in. So that was
we could tell some stories on this one. Just that, we probably had to do a session alone on what it took. It's not because they worked on me for so long. I mean, I've known about RISE for years, and the initial approach was, oh my gosh, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, it was a long time. Of getting RISE to a point where RISE was ready for Ken, but more importantly, getting Ken to a point where Ken was ready for RISE, I think was the issue.
That was one of the things that I started, Dulcie. So, Ken and I have known each other for, a long time now, almost 10 years.
10 years, yeah.
And I saw the notification go up on, one of the social networks that said that he had a new job. And I said, so I sent him a text and I wrote, I think it was like capital J dot capital O.
Yeah.
Capital B.
Yeah. And then he said, is this your first job ever? I think that was what the text actually asked.
It was something along those lines. And so, we got to talking and he told me how exciting it was. And then, learning a little bit about, how this partnership has worked, really gave him, a lot of, confidence, moving into the role, I think. And so it's pretty cool.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. Which I think is huge. That's been great.
Well, I'm certainly excited to hear more about this and see it come to fruition. Having had the opportunity to speak with Aaron and Tomas and Blake and Kyle, and then have some other things lined up here with some of their new partnerships, and of course Ken continuing to push that forward on the business development side and say, okay, hey, we're at a spot now, mechanically speaking, where we're ready to commercialize things. We need to actually bring in sales. I think this is a really interesting tipping point, for RISE Robotics and then moving forward.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like right now is the cusp of when, it moves from R&D into pilot, which they've been doing over the course of the last year. And then you really think about how you're expanding those pilots and creating a product in a vertical, and what does that look like? And I think this is an incredibly exciting time for the company.
Yeah, it's, following some, we've had some government success, right? And DOD, success, but the first, now we're about to embark on the first commercial, first full commercial test. That's not a test. It's the first commercial application of RISE technology, and in September. It is a really exciting time to be part of this team. It is happening right now.
Yeah. Yeah, the energy in the office is palpable, that's for sure, and it's really, really exciting. So yeah. It is. Dulcie, thank you so much for joining Ken and I today. It's great to get your perspective on things. I'd love to do some more of these, and especially learn more in the future about how you link companies and partnerships. Ken, as always, this is awesome. We got to make this a regular thing.
Yeah. Well, you know what? If you need a co-host, just let me know.
Okay. You've been listening to Rise Inside. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Justin.
You have been listening to the Rise Inside podcast, presented by RISE Robotics. On behalf of our guest today and host Justin Starbird, thank you for listening. Please share your feedback on our LinkedIn page, linkedin.com/company/RISE-robotics.